Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly suggested. The following is for educational and amusement purposes only. It is the verbatim federal according to Inner City Press. The seventh day of Diddy's federal trial was already in turmoil. 1. Something unexpected happened. Comedian, commentator, and host of the world's most downloaded podcast, Joe Rogan, walked through no entourage, no attorneys, just a man holding a small black notebook and a memory filled with unpleasant realities. That began as speculative. Commentary on his podcast had taken a serious turn. Joe Rogan was here to testify under oath, and what he disclosed wasn't rumor. It was experience, observation, and a trail of receipts that went far beyond viral headlines when he began to speak. It was evident this wasn't just a celebrity trial. This was the unraveling of a whole system, and Joe Rogan had just taken the stand to lay the story straight. The Diddy trial began with an explosive buzz in the air. The press gallery was already filled, with rumors circulating like wildfire. But nothing prepared anyone for what happened when Joe Rogan, comedian, commentator, and host of the most watched podcast in the world, strolled into the courtroom as a surprise witness. It wasn't simply a publicity gimmick, but a full-throttle intervention, and Joe Rogan didn't come empty-handed. Wearing a dark gray blazer and jeans, Rogan cut a casual but determined as he mounted the stand. The room became silent. No cameras were allowed, but court sketch artists hurried to capture every emotion. Diddy's defense team seemed perplexed when the judge requested Rogan to state his name and profession. "I'm Joseph James Rogan, host of the Joe Rogan Experience." He didn't waste time. "And I'm not here to gossip. I'm here because I've been provided first-hand accounts from guests on my show, tales that connect intimately to what's happening in this courtroom. I also have tapes, and yes, I've saved them." A wave of whispers went across the courtroom. Roger was suddenly being treated like a whistleblower as he spoke about interviews he had conducted over during the years with ex-bodyguards, former label executives, and industry insiders. Many of them were too terrified to speak off the record, so they came to me not as a judge, but as someone who wouldn't cut the tape when the facts got painful. Rogan dropped the first bombshell. "Back in 2023, I had aguised on former security detail for an A-list artist affair." He stated Diddy had files, physical evidence, videos, recordings, and a private server stored in Athos. Guests claimed that Jay-Z, LeBron James, and other popular celebrities were aware of the freak-offs, not necessarily participating, but they knew. The courtroom exploded in gasps. Diddy seemed visibly concerned. His lawyers objected, but the judge overruled. Roger went on to relate how this specific guest had witnessed a lot of these celebrations personally. He described them as rites. More than parties. Rogan stated phones were confiscated, attendees were blindfolded, the term freak-off was code inside the industry, and everyone acted as if everything was normal. The prosecution inquired if Rogan had brought any recordings, and he nodded. "I sent snippets to the DA's office before coming here, and they contain audio of Funknown insiders talking about these events. Some of the voices have been authenticated by forensic audio specialists because the judge ordered those tapes to be officially logged." Rogan said something that made every juror sit up. "I've had Navy SEALs, conspiracy theorists, academicians, and even whistleblowers, and I've never heard anything this awful come from the mouths of somebody so high up in showbiz." He looked toward Diddy and completed part of his remarks with a calm wrath. "This isn't simply celebrity gossip. This is institutional abuse lurking behind platinum records and red carpet." Grins as Rogan conned deeper into his evidence. The court led him to recall particular stories exchanged on his podcast over the last many years. He revealed that he has been piecing together a worrying pattern since as early as 2018. "One of my early guests was a tour manager for a renowned R&B group. He came on to talk about the dark side of the music industry, drug culture, pay-for-play, and indes. But during the break, he told me something different. Diddy's parties weren't simply extravagant, they were dangerous." Roger underlined that many of these discussions never reached the final edit because people were terrified. One guest requested that I muffle his voice, distort his name, and even record his section in a remote Then he referenced a producer who had been invited to a Diddy-organized event. In 2015, he told me what he witnessed there left him dead, shaking cameras embedded in smoke detectors, people sneaking items into drinks, a list celebs pretending to notice. Joe read from notes made during the off-air conversation and said, and I quote, "I watched people being filmed against their consent," and Diddy called it when questioned if these reports were validated. Rogan stated, "Many were anecdotal, but too many lied to ignore these were rumors circulated in hallways." But precise reports, timelines, locations, several persons describing the identical set-off explained that he had a private collection of these unaired tales protected by NDAs he negotiated with legal advisors. "I didn't want to be sued into oblivion, but I also didn't want this stuff buried." When he mentioned the Jane Doe lawsuits, I started connecting the dots. When the identities and conduct in those cases matched what my guests had been gossiping about for years, he revealed that in 2022, a popular music video director came to him sobbing, telling him that he had unreleased, uncut footage of one of Diddy's parties. Said he was too terrified to go public, but he'd been blackmailed into taping these occurrences for over a decade. Joe closed by saying, "This is not a court of opinion anymore. This is a reckoning. And I'm here because individuals who trusted me with the truth need to be heard, even if they're too terrified to expose their faces." Joe Rogan took a deep breath before moving to the event that made headlines across the world. Elon Musk's unexpected remarks on his podcast on Jennifer Lopez and Diddy were casual at first. Joe added, "We were talking about Hollywood hypocrisy, how certain celebrities speak out about politics yet remain mute when it comes to people they know." Elon brought up Jennifer Lopez. The Courtroom leaned in, and he said she dated Diddy, attended to his parties, and knew what he was like. "So why hasn't warned anyone?" Rogan halted. That clip skyrocketed. It got millions of views. But what surprised me was how quickly people jumped to defend instead of asking what she was hiding. J-Lo reminded the court of the 1999 nightclub shooting that resulted in Shine's. Jennifer was in the car when the gun was allegedly thrown out the window, and she stated that Diddy did not do it. Walked free. Shine went to prison, and Jennifer, she remained dating Diddy for 2 more years, which Joe allowed sit with the jury before proceeding. What does it indicate when someone walks out of a shooting, helps protect the detained man, and remains with him while then added a terrifying phrase about what happens if you're only perfect for the devil? Roger pointed out that while many celebrities blogged about Diddy's charities, nobody spoke up when the litigation started stacking up. Where was J-Lo when the freak-off recordings were mentioned? Where was she when Shine finally informed the truth about 1999? He closed with a clear statement, "I'm not saying she did anything criminal. I'm saying silence in the face of abuse is complicity." And too many people in Diddy's sphere have learned the art of fleeing when the cameras turn. Joe Rogan leans forward as he returned to a narrative that had troubled him for months, a tale involving what one of his off-the-air guests dubbed the bunker. A former bodyguard who worked at Diddy's Miami complex came on my show in 2022. Rogan began, "We didn't air that segment because he got cold feet." But what according to Rogan, the bodyguard detailed a reinforced basement-like vault located beneath the mansion that was only accessible by biometric scan inside it. The witness stated there were dozens of encrypted hard drives. He named it the black box, and it was Diddy's insurance policy. Explained footage of freak-off parties, blackmail material, contracts, hidden camera recordings, and not just of regular people, celebrities, and executive politicians in the courtroom. Gasp. Diddy's defense team visibly uncomfortable. One juror went for their water glass with shaky hands, went in during a backup session. There were racks of servers, all air-gapped. He didn't get far before a person with a rifle instructed him to leave the room immediately. "That is Diddy's church," the guard said. Joe hesitated. "That word stayed with me because whatever was in that chamber was precious to someone sacred because it held." When the judge permitted the prosecution to bring Rogan's affidavit including this account into evidence, explaining that although the physical out the existence of the were facing inward, one even alleged she was asked to sign an NDA in that very room after discovering what seemed like a disguised peephole embedded in Theragon. Said people describe these settings and routines in the exact same way years apart. from different walks of life. And that's what's terrifying. He revealed something the courtroom had not heard before 3 months ago. A whistleblower came out to my team anonymously. Said they worked for a third-party data recovery company in Miami and were hired to retrieve encrypted footage from a corrupted server. It showed people at Diddy's events in compromising situations. I did not air it, but I stored it because if this trial reaches a federal seizure level, he closed the interview by staring straight at Diddy and saying, "If you're innocent, let them check the basement." Open Thebe. This point, the courtroom had changed, and Joe Rogan was more than simply a celebrity. Witness, he was an informant pointing to a pattern of manipulation, fear, and silence. "I want to talk about patterns," he stated, glancing through a thick set notes written privately, "because this isn't just about parties, it's about control, fear, image, and silence." Rogan set out a list of former guests who hinted at secrets but never followed through on them, one of whom was a hairstylist who dealt with level celebrities. The show to talk about fashion, but off-air, she informed me she left the profession because of what Diddy forced her watch one night at a Hamptons residence. Party. She noticed someone being recorded in a private room through a two-way mirror, then he spun. I asked her who else was there that night. She hesitated, and Sadrager added that she did not indicate Jay-Z participated in anything, but she did mention he was present several times. He walked around those events like a ghost, never speaking or lingering, yet he was there. The suggestion wasn't that Jay's committed a crime. It was that he witnessed and said nothing. I've had ex-security dancers, personal assistants, and producers all say the same thing about Jay-Z. Diddy was like two sides of the same coin. One was noisy and chaotic, and the other was controlled and peaceful. But the scenes were always the same, according to Roger. When he challenged an industry insider about why nobody called out the behavior, Joe chuckled and said, "He told me you don't take down Puff without pulling Have down too." The prosecution latched on that line because it fit their thesis of institutional protection. People turning. Joe continued, "If Diddy was the fire, Jay-Z was the smoke detector that never went off." He then discussed how his team received anonymous texts warning them to drop the Diddy topics. One email wrote, "Don't dig too deep, Joe, you'll end up like the ones who did. We traced that IP address. It came from a firm affiliated to Roc Nation's PR team." The judge approved that statement. With a cautionary remark, Roger glanced at the jury and added, "Silence is a weapon, and this entire mechanism is founded on people keeping their mouth shut. But I'm not constructed that way." Joe's tone changed as he brought to the last set of names, individuals who he said were in the wrong room at the wrong time. "You all remember the Monzero lawsuit? And the one where a man claimed he was paraded around Diddy's party in a mask made of human anatomy? That is not hearsay. I spoke with someone who was on the yacht. He recounted a young filmmaker in his early 20s who had been hired to shoot an event in January 2023. He said he was advised to exclusively document Joe, then read from an anonymous transcript that there were celebrities everywhere, including LeBron James, Gloria Estefan, Jay-Z, Beyonce, folks smiling, but the further back you walked, the darker it got. There were rooms with red lights, people restrained, and a Manuel being lead around like a pet. The courtroom was dead silent. Joe stated that the man claimed to have turned over his memory cards at the conclusion of the night. Did's crew offered him $5,000 and took the tape. They assured him he would get a final cut later, but he never heard from them again. This evidence was so powerful because it tied directly to a legitimate civil complaint. If you think this is all anarchy, it's not. It's a system. And the frightening aspect is that the individuals we idolize are in the rooms where it happens. He concluded with a chilling line. If even one of those records gets played in court, half this business is over. He looked down, closed his notebook, and added, "I'm not worried of getting sued. I'm afraid of what happens if we keep pretending Joe." Rogan's tone switched once more, this time from celebrity complicity to the infamous 2023 yacht party that had been rumored about in court files but never officially revealed until now. The boat narrative, folks assume it's a myth Rogan concocted. But it's true. And I have testimony from two distinct people who were on that boat, one crew member and one visitor. The courtroom froze, and Diddy's legal team began talking furiously. Joe unwrapped a letter from a former yacht staffer redacted to conceal their name. They were employed for what they thought was during a private music video shoot. The passengers were informed that they were VIPs and could not use their phones. Security patted them down before boarding. As the boat entered international waters, the tone changed. Curtains were shut, and a private area was closed and came what the crew dubbed the rotation. New visitors brought in every hour escorted by security. Joe's voice grew colder. The witness said there were hidden cameras were put inside mirror frames, and some of the staff were asked to spike drinks. Some refused, but others did not. A stillness fell over the gallery, and the guest that came forward wasn't intended to be there. He was a last-minute addition as a favor to someone in the industry. Networking had turned out to be something altogether else. Joe relayed the guest's testimony. There was a man in a mask, and everyone were laughing at him. Except it wasn't performance art. People had their phones out, and several of the individuals watching were really famous, including one of the names Rogan mentioned. Many testimonies. Gloria Estefan. No one suggesting she engaged in anything, he clarified. But her name came up just like LeBron's Beyonce's S, like Jay-Z's, creates a terrible image, Joe then disclosed. The most important detail, claiming that once the yacht docked, he was off a red refused money to forget what he witnessed, and 2 weeks later, his flat was broken into, with just his external hard drives stolen. The court ordered the statement put into evidence. Rogan gazed at the jury. People risked their lives to speak the truth, while others were bribed to forget it. Joe Rogan's testimony had transformed the mood of the entire trial. No longer was this about celebrity antics. It was about systemic intimidation, power, and blackmail. Talk about leverage, he remarked bluntly, because what Diddy established was not just a party environment, but an ecosystem of quiet. He informed the court that many podcast guests off-air, in whispers and often in tears, recounted the exact same process. You are reinvited to a party. You're told to sign an NDA. You're videotaped without your knowledge. And then a month later, you get a text, not a threat, just a reminder that you had fun last. Joe referred to it as a network of invisible handcuffs, describing how a Grammy-winning producer informed him that he had been offered red declined a big career boost in exchange for deleting a video filmed at a Diddy party, and 3 venues canceled his tour a week later. Roger also remarked how he had gotten legal letters from public relations firms advising him to cease criticizing certain individuals he did not name, but the jury did not require a roadmap then. The unsettling aspect came when a guest who had worked for a celebrity security service informed me there was a master folder called the Rainy Day File. Joe mentioned that this folder contains backups. Footage is encrypted and stored off-site. Insurance is based on the assumption that if someone tried to take him down, he would leak what he had on them. He took a depound of those files, is the source told me about a really powerful volition. The name is not mine to say. However, if the feds obtain such videos, the trial is only the beginning, for the judge ordered that line be struck. But Joe closed the segment, and the damage was done. With this wasn't fame, this was fear. He did not merely throw parties. He built a vault of quiet, and if one key turns it, everything comes out as his testimony. As it neared its finish, Joe Rogan stood from Thief was not invited to sit in the witness chair. But this isn't what I needed to complete standing. Regarding the cancellation, Diddy stated that it is about finally holding somebody accountable for creating an empire based on fraud. Judge authorized him to make a closing statement. The courtroom was very quiet. Even the sketch artist had paused a drawing. Rogan continued, over the years, I have interviewed astronauts and scientists, philosophers, comedians, and former spies. You learn to recognize when someone is lying to you. Learn to recognize when someone is holding back because they're afraid. And I'm telling what I've heard about Diddy doesn't come from trolls. It came from folks hopeful who were shaking while speaking. Every 10 seconds he looked over their shoulders, paused. If the feds don't look at film from the public, will Samin has it. And when it comes out, the courtroom will appear like a warm dash-up. He then glanced at Diddy and said, I am not sure if you started this. You inherited it. But I am sure you retained it going and now you're seeing it crumble. Seeing it crumble.